Welcome to the QP Diaries podcast. This podcast is all about inspiring and empowering the next generation of QP professionals and future quality assurance leaders in the UK pharmaceutical industry. On every episode, I'll be speaking to QPs from across the industry, and our listeners will have the opportunity to hear their stories, their expertise, and we'll be discussing topics to foster growth and learning to help you develop your career as a qualified person. If you're passionate about quality assurance and want to learn from some of the very best QPs and thought leaders from across the industry, then this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Dal Pawar, the founder of AssureBio, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Chris, welcome to the QP Diaries podcast. How are you today?
Very good, thanks. Yourself, Dal?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, it's a Monday. It's not too bad. It's quite busy, so the day's going quickly.
Got you. Very
Perfect,
good.
Chris. Yeah, well, thank you for agreeing to have a chat with me today. So it's a pleasure to have you on the show. And as we've already discussed, this show is about inspiring and empowering the current and next generation of QPs. So it's an opportunity for you to tell your story and to share your words of wisdom and your expertise in the industry. So I suppose to get us started, can you share a brief overview of your career journey as a quality assurance professional and, of course, as a QP, please?
Yeah, so I've been working for around 30 years. I've just passed my 30th anniversary quite recently, which is a bit of a surprise, honestly, which is good. So I've worked most in quality, probably 3/4 of that time in quality. I've worked in operations the rest of the time, and I've done a little bit of work in sort of product development, but really mostly in quality. And I've worked in big and small companies, all in pharma, across lots of different sectors of the industry, from consumer health through to sort of clinical trial ATMP, so all types of stuff. And I've been very lucky to have a broad experience, and it stood me in good stead, to be honest with you. I've found I can apply it to lots of different things. So I've been very lucky in that regard.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And then in terms of being a QP, when did you qualify?
Yeah, so a bit of a story. So I did my QP training at Brighton back in the late 1990s. And then, like a lot of folks, it took me a bit of time to get through to the Viva exam. I mean, the Viva, it's a bit of a sort of it's a sort of cliff face in front of you that you've got to climb it. So it took me till about 2006 to get that completed. So I spent a bit of time sort of working on my career, doing sort of management stuff, and I thought, I better get this Viva thing figured out. So I did quite a bit of revision. And I went back round and got that completed in around 2006, and been a QP ever since. So it's a great job, honestly, really, really good fun. Yeah.
So you've got a wealth of experience as a QP then.
Yeah, again, I've worked on sort of sterile, non-sterile products, clinical and non-clinical, and biologics and small molecules. So lots of different stuff. Had that, again, been very lucky to have that variety in my career, and look at some difficult products as well. So again, been good fun, actually. Enjoyed it, and get a lot of sort of challenges, but those are the things that make your work life interesting.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you touched upon the sort of leadership piece. So I suppose what made you go down the route to become a QP over 17 years ago now?
Yeah. So I got it's a while to think back. So I was just really interesting. Sort of getting to the centre of what was going on. I wanted to be the decision maker. And be the person involved in sort of in steering how quality worked, and thinking about the end user, and how to protect them. And I think that one of the great things about being a QP is you get the opportunity to leave work at the end of the day thinking you've really done something useful for the patient who's going to take that medicine. And I was really interested in that part of it. I felt probably quite maybe sounds a bit arrogant, but I felt it was somewhere I could really do a good job. and I felt it was something I could really make a really meaningful contribution. I felt it suited my skills. I love sort of puzzles and problems, and I love trying to work out how to solve them. So and there is a lot of problem solving in being a QP. You've got to sort of work out. Can I get to the end of this process? How am I going to do it? Can we? If you've got a problem, can I fix it? And knowing as well, knowing when you can't fix it, and you have to say, guys, we've got to stop now. So that it's a great intellectual challenge, and you get that sense you're helping somebody as well. So really good in that regard also.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it sounds like in terms of your experience as a QP, sort of steriles, non-steriles, and I suppose different therapy areas, which of course are of value to the patient at the end of that. So where I suppose even going back even further in terms of your passion for the pharmaceutical industry, because as you mentioned, you've gone from consumer health to pharma to ATMPs. I suppose where does the passion lie? Is there a specific area which you've sort of niched down on over the years?
It's a tough one. I mean, I loved consumer health. Consumer health. It's all about speed, agility. It's really fast paced. It's really and it's not simple because you're solving different problems that you would probably do in traditional pharma. So I did really enjoy that. I really enjoyed nuclear medicine as well. I spent a lot of time in nuclear medicine. The challenge with nuclear medicine with short half-life products, you've got no time. The shelf life of the products is probably 12 hours, 8 effective hours. So again, you've got to be able to think on your feet and really puzzle stuff out. As a QP, there's a lot of heavy lifting involved in short half-life nuclear medicine, and I really enjoyed the challenge of that. It's tough, and the patient's very visible. You often get a patient list every day from the clinic, so you're much closer to the person you're treating. So you get that amplified sense you're doing something valuable for the end user. So that I had a great time in nuclear medicine, really good fun. And more recently, I've done a lot of work on clinical products, and again, very interesting because it's a different challenge. There's no license, so you're working out is what I'm doing appropriate for the clinical group that the product's going to be administered to. You get sort of challenges that have never occurred for that product before. You're the first person to meet them, and also you've got challenges like it's the first time this medicine's been given to people. So there's a lot of different sort of challenges there. That's quite good fun as well. So it's hard to pick between them, but all good.
So you've learned a lot over the years and overcome many challenges throughout your experience as a QP. So and I suppose we know each other quite well, and I know over the past number of years you've been working on a couple of interesting projects. I suppose in particular new site builds and obtaining MHRA GMP license approvals for organisations in the UK. So pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's become a bit of a niche. I didn't mean for it to, but it's all become a bit of a I did a couple and then I did a couple more, and I've depending on how you count, I've done 6 or 7 now. So I must be getting close to a record, I think.
So 6 in the UK. I know that you've got global experience as well.
And so I've completed the new MHRA. It was a new MHRA and FDA approval within about 2 months of each other for a site in Asia as well. And I set up the project for another site in Asia, but I'd moved on from the company before it was completed. So the MHRA and FDA almost simultaneous approval was tough. So that was a tough one. But I've done a bunch in the UK as well for the new MHRA licenses. So it really, I've done. As I say, I must be close to a record now. I've done quite a few of them, but challenging, but very interesting.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, I was about to say it's an area which interests me. It's obviously, yes, it involves all of your skills as a quality professional. But I mean, I've got a couple of questions around this. So in particular, first of all, I suppose it'd be good for me to understand, and also our listeners, is why do you need a site license, and how do you go about obtaining one?
Sure. So the license is a legal requirement. So it's basically it's your contract with the government for the types of products you're going to produce, the type of facility you have, and the type of activity you're going to carry out in that facility. So your license will say product class, so it's been sterile, non-sterile. It will describe the type of activities you do, so manufacturing, packaging, QC testing, QP disposition. It will outline all those activities. And it's a pretty lengthy document, so there's you can have all different types of products, so different types of biological products, different types of small molecule products, and all the types of activities you can do. And there's a bunch of other categories for unusual stuff that might be unique to your company. So applying for a license is actually quite easy. You fill in a form and you submit it to the MHRA, and the MHRA will come and inspect your facility. So the mechanics is quite easy. The challenge is getting ready for that process. And really the difficulty as a company is you can't carry out any activities until that license has been granted. So you can't. So if you're going to make a batch of product that's a medicine for human or veterinary use, you can't do any of that work until the license is granted. So it's a key milestone in the new facility project, and critically essential before you can start any activities. And you have to abide by the terms of that license. So it is regulated in law through the Medicines Act in the UK. And the MHRA have the powers to enforce the terms of that license. And they have quite a lot of power to do that. So you do, as a license holder, once you've got it, you need to be mindful of those things to make sure you keep hold of that license, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can imagine it's not a straightforward process.
It's tough. Everyone's different. So it's really bespoke to the company, the nature of the product you're going to make, the site that you have. So you may be building a new site, you may not be. You may be inside an existing site. The size of the operation, the types of products you're going to make, all these things have a massive influence on the program that you're going to need to carry out to obtain that license.
Yeah. So I suppose with that in mind, I mean, what are the major challenges that you've faced, that you've come across in your experience?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, honestly. So I think first of all, you've got to think about the phases of the program. So most people are going to build a facility. So you've got a build phase. Then you've got a licensing phase where you build the facility, you stock it with equipment, and then you do all your good stuff like getting your equipment validated, putting your GMP systems in place to prepare for your inspection. And then after that, the phase that people often forget, you've got a kind of optimization phase. So you've got a facility, you've got a license, you've got some people in there, but you've got to start making the product and doing it efficiently and effectively. And that usually takes a bit of time. It's usually not perfect on day one. You need to do a bit of work to get things working the way that you'd like. So there's those three phases, and they all suffer challenges. So I think in the design and build phase, your main challenge is around making sure you've got key users involved in the process. So when you design the facility, you have an expert who ideally is going to be either like someone like your operations manager on board early, or senior operators, and they can help you design the facility and get it right. We've all been in facilities where you look at the design and say, who designed this? It's crazy. And the reason for that is because the users weren't involved in early stages. It was probably designed by somebody with the best of intentions, but didn't have experience of using the facility. So you want those people on board. Most pharma companies don't have civil engineers in the company. So you probably want to contract an expert in building facilities who knows the regulations, who knows how to build a facility for the pharma industry. And those companies exist. Yeah. So you do need one of those kind of organizations on board to help you. Even massive companies don't tend to have that in-house because they don't build things very often. So you want to have somebody from the quality department involved in the design and build as well. so you can think about how you're going to license that facility. And you will probably have a milestone where you start the project, and then you have a milestone for the end of the build, and your next big milestone is your inspection. So you sort of, a typical plan for that sort of build, you probably have 2,000 lines on that plan. Wouldn't be unusual to get you across those 3 milestones. And you want to really build that plan and examine it probably weekly, monthly, and make sure the plan's on track and still relevant. It typically takes about 2 years to build a new facility and get it registered.
Okay.
Most organizations are too ambitious. They want to do it in less time.
Yeah.
You can't really do it. It's just too difficult. So often one of the challenges you find is that in the initial planning phase, the plan's been too optimistic, and there's not sufficient time to get the build completed, get the facility validated, and get it licensed. So if you think about it, if you're going to build a sterile facility, you probably want 3 to 6 months of environmental monitoring after the build. There's no way to speed that up. You just need that data. In terms of project setup, there's often a lot of challenges in that area. So I've worked on 2 projects where there's been no QA budget for the project. Right. So we've had to go back and ask for a QA budget. I'm a QA guy, I would say that. Yeah. But you've got to, you need validation, you need quality resources in the project. You've got to have those budgeted. You've got to have you've got to bring on stream your production team as part of the licensing. So you need at least part of that team. That's often not budgeted. And often projects are designed without a contingency. So you probably want a contingency of time and cash of probably between 10 and 20%. But that's an unusual way of working in our industry. Most projects, you're going to buy a piece of equipment for an existing site. You have a budget, you install it, you have a couple of validation guys, you get it validated. You don't need a contingency for a project like that. But for new builds, you need that. So you can end up getting into budget challenges because you don't have that contingency in place. So there are challenges in the build, but if you have the right people in place, you have a good plan, you can overcome them. Yeah. So when you get to licensing, then the different challenges emerge. So you need good data to show the inspector when they come for the first inspection. So you've got to show that your environment's under control, that your equipment's validated, and most critically that your QMS is operating. So you've got to have been writing documents. You've got to have completed things like deviations, change controls, and CAPAs. Yeah. And you've got to be able to show the inspector that those systems operate. It's not good enough to show them a procedure and say, we'll do some deviations when we get working. And you probably want a couple of what I would call exhibition batches that you can show the inspector and say, we know how to make the product. Here's some deviations that happened in the batch. Here's some changes we put through the change control system. Here's some procedure updates we need to do. You can demonstrate the QMS is working. Yeah. There's often pressure on to call an inspection as early as possible. Of course, the company will have invested a lot of money. So senior management rightly will put pressure on to say, guys, we need an inspection soon. So how soon can you get it? As soon as possible. And as the project team, you've got to believe you're ready, and you've got to show a plan of how you're going to be ready for that inspection. You've got to be able to get there, basically. And my advice to any project team is don't go early, because show, if you're not ready, explain why. Show the things you need to do to get ready, and have that conversation with top management and say, look, we can be ready at this time, but if we go before, there's a risk. And that risk is the inspector says you're not ready. They usually come back about 9 months to a year later. So if you go too early, the risk is that you will add a year to the project. Okay. So that is a big danger. And you've got to sort of stick to your guns and have a really clear plan to get to inspection. And you want to share that plan early with your top management to get them on board with that plan, basically.
Yeah, I was going to say, so based on commercial pressure, Have there been any instances where they've gone too early that you've been involved in?
So yes, so I think everybody goes a tiny bit too early, but if you go 1%, you can live, honestly. So I think that's just, a great quote I heard is that the best work, I can't remember who said it, but the best work is done by the right people with just not quite enough time.
Right.
So so I think that time pressure does help on these projects. If they're open-ended, they'll never be finished. You do need that time pressure. So there'll always be something you'd like to finish the week before the inspection, and it's probably not quite perfect, and that's okay. But no, I have been involved in a couple of projects where we've had to move the dates because we couldn't, because challenges emerged in the project where we couldn't get ready in time. But the inspector will often, if they come out and you're not ready, you'll make them pretty cross, and you'll go to the bottom of the pile. So so you need to really be confident you're ready before you go, and you need to agree as a group what ready looks like. But yes, it can happen. It does happen that people go for inspections, they're not ready. They've been poorly advised, or they've not understood the requirements at the inspection. So I think it's useful to use ex-inspectors. So in most of my projects, I recommend to have a couple of mock inspections, as if it was the inspection, and really get the inspector to challenge where you are, and really kick the tires and make sure you're ready, and get their opinion about if you're ready. If they say, guys, you're completely not ready, you need to revise your plan, they'll never say you're fine. They'll say, I think if you do this, this, and this, you'll be okay. That's a good answer. So they'll never they can't give you a pass. So so yes, that pressure does come, and as a team, you need to be prepared for it, and you need to be clear about what you need to do to be ready. You just need to be able to explain that to your management and get them on board with that plan. There is a challenge afterwards which nobody thinks about, which is optimization. So you've got a facility, you've built it, you've got a license, you've put some people in it, but you've never operated, and there's a ramp up. So if I think about my first nuclear medicine facility, at the start, a batch was the most unbelievable effort to get a batch out, and our success rate was probably 50%. We probably lost half our batches in the first couple of weeks. Now, after 6 months, we could make batches easily. It was no sweat, and we actually started diverting guys to do other stuff. So we built a training facility for new nuclear medicine sites, and we brought in folks and did training on how to operate nuclear medicine. And we started out with 6 guys running the batch. We got to a point where 3 could do it. We didn't, we kept busy. We sort of didn't tell senior management about that, but we had plenty of stuff to do. So there is this optimization phase, and again, you need to be prepared for that as a new site, because your first couple of batches will be tough, will be very tough, and it's not because you're doing things wrong. It's just you're not match fit. So you've got to get through that process of getting ready, and that should go into the plan, because usually the plan ends with license granted, facility open, but there's a teething phase which can be challenging, and you should be prepared for that. And you should maybe not put too many orders on after the license. You probably want to do, for the first couple of months, you operate about half speed, maybe for the first 6 months, and after a year, things will be really working well. But the new site management should be prepared for that and work on it.
Okay, so typically there's a 6-month sort of grace period where, it may involve redefining the processes, the operations, and ensuring that, I suppose, everything is fit for purpose.
Yeah, that stuff you wrote for the inspection, you look at it at the time, I think you write it at the time, you think that's great. Yeah, I've written a really good SOP there. You come to use it on your first batch, and maybe it's got a couple of holes in it. You maybe need to go back, rewrite it. Maybe you need to raise a change control to fix some stuff, do some more training with the team. Your operators will say, we knew that was never going to work, honestly. But you sort of go through that process of getting stuff optimized. And I call that the optimization phase. And it doesn't appear in most people's plan for a new site. It's going to get the license and we're ready to go, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's not a big celebration once you get the approval. It's actually, let's take a step back and reassess and ensure that, we can produce efficiently. So, that makes sense.
I mean, getting a new license is a big deal. It feels great, honestly. It's one of the biggest achievements as a facility you can make, and it's right to celebrate it. But there is, after that, that's when the work really starts, basically.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, and I suppose you mentioned a couple of challenges there. What about sort of people challenges, which I'm assuming can be a big part of it, especially as a new site and you're building teams?
It is. I think it's essential to get that part right. I think that the new site rests on the quality of the team that are managing it and working it, and it should be your primary objective. I think that the difficulties that I've seen in the past is that the team are new. So everybody brings baggage from their previous roles, so they have a previous way of doing things. And what you've got to do is you've got to form that culture of what is the way we're going to do it at the new site. What's our new culture at the new site? And you've got to try and pick the best things from that people bring from their different previous cultures and incorporate them. I think there's also a bit of a challenge around the QMS, because when you start a new site, the QMS isn't operating, and you can get into this sort of tailspin of saying, well, I haven't written a procedure, so how do I do anything? The deviation procedure is not working, so if something goes wrong, how do I document it? And what you've got to do is you've got to have a plan for when you switch these systems on. You have like a GMP go live date. And you'll find yourself in this weird situation where you've got a deviation procedure, but probably no change control procedure. Or you've got half your equipment validated, but the other half isn't. You might have a training procedure, but you might not have a document control procedure. So you've got to sort of navigate that. And that when people come from sites that have been operated routinely, that can be very scary. And people can get very nervy about how do I do things. So you've really got to be able to manage that process. And also there's this challenge that things are changing every day. So if you've got a site that's open and operating today, what you're trying to do is keep the train running. But for a new site, what you're trying to do is get to the station. It's a different. It's a different challenge, and you've got to as one chapter in the story developing new site closes, another one opens, and the team have got to be mentally prepared for that. So when the build's complete, you put down a load of tasks and challenges, and you pick up a load of different new ones. So you've got to replan, you've got to reassign tasks to different people. People's roles change in big ways as the build develops. So you've got to telegraph that to people at the start of the process when they've not done it before, and you've got to really manage them through that process. And my experience is when there's two of you leading it, it's much better. My preference is that you have like somebody who looks after the operational stuff and somebody who looks after the compliance stuff. And those two work hand in hand, and then you get a good build. If it's one person, you can be overwhelmed. It's a big. It doesn't matter how good you are. When it's one person, it's a giant project. You can get stuck in the detail. You need probably a couple of people to run that project. 3 is a good number as well, where you have like a project manager as well. So it's a sort of 2 to 3 people who guide the project from start to finish. And they bring the rest of the team along with them. And it's good to have at least one person in the team who's done it before, who's seen the challenges, because it's different to other projects. So either a project manager who's done a new site in the past, or one of the team members. But you need a senior person who knows how it works to get from a build to a license to an optimal running factory. It's good to have somebody who's seen it before, because it's a tough environment to develop in. It could be a very tough developmental role to build one for the first time. That was my experience. I built the first one on my own, and it was right. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone.
Okay. Yeah. So it's pretty critical to ensure that you have a good leadership team around you, plus other experience who have gone through the process before in the team. Just to understand expectations, I suppose.
And the earlier that team starts, the better. You almost want that team there to write the proposal if you can. That can sometimes be very difficult, but you want to this as soon as you assign that team, what they usually have to do is go back and look at the initial work that was done, and often do a bit of a rewrite, because the assumptions early were not based on the best data, because it was so early in the project. So you want to get that team on board as early as you can. Certainly an operations person as early as humanly possible. Ideally, you want the person who's going to run the new site to write the proposal. You'll get the best. You'll get the best of the project then, basically.
Yeah, brilliant. And I don't want you to give away all of your secrets, but
Sure.
can you share a small part of the strategy which you employ to address, a particular challenge, say with people who maybe not be used to the sort of versatile environment that they're going into, and the moving parts that they have to deal with?
Sure. So I think part of that is how you recruit that team. So to be very clear, what happens is that the people that build a facility are often, once it's up and running, will move on to different challenges. And that's just a normal thing, and companies shouldn't be afraid of that, because the agility and openness to change need to build a new site is often incompatible with routinely operating a site. So you want to have the right people in those different roles. Some of them will carry over, but you shouldn't, as you go through the phases, certainly into optimization, companies shouldn't be too alarmed about any attrition. So when you recruit that team to do the build, what you should be doing is talking to potential candidates about the openness for change, how they deal with changing priorities, and try and sort of drill into their agility. So you look in their previous experience to say what similar things you've done before that could demonstrate you have the sort of skills to navigate this environment, and really be open about that. I think as the leaders of the team doing the build, you want to really spend time in the plan with the team. So in my last big project I did, we probably had about a 2,000 line Gantt chart, and the whole build team sat down and developed that process together. It took us a few days, but it was time well spent, because we had the buy-in of the whole team into that process then. And we assigned those actions as we developed them, so that the whole team could understand the plan. They could ask questions about why we're doing this at this time, why we putting this up till later, and they could see that we couldn't do everything together, and that we had to face stuff. So I think it's really about engagement is really essential in that process to building a new site. It's more critical than operating an established site, because you need that maximal engagement for a new build. Whereas if you've got a facility that's in a steady state, you can rely on the established systems to drive the processes along. But for a new build, you're relying on the people. So it's about building the right team to get the facility up and running. It's about engagement with that team. It's about making sure that they understand their responsibilities in the process, and the classic stuff about holding clear, and making those responsibilities clear, and holding people to account for those responsibilities. And giving them opportunity where if lots of stuff goes wrong in a new build, so getting people to be open about that. So I remember on the previous new build that we did we needed to make some exhibition batches at the time. They were really time pressured, and we had a sterility event during one of the batches. It was our best operator at the time, and he straight away, we had the sterility event, so he got QA, all the experts involved straight away. We went through the event that had happened. We worked out how to document it, we were able to write our way out of it, and the inspector actually looked at it as part of the approval, and gave us a clean bill of health on how we'd manage that event. But it was because the person who did it was engaged. It was just a mistake that anyone could have made. It was an error in the module. He fessed up straight away. He got the right people involved, and we fixed it. So, and that was because his engagement was right, and he understood what he needed to do.
Yeah. It sounds like the culture is pretty critical at the very start of building that team, and creating that team cohesion. And putting the plan together as a team, as you mentioned many times. And it sounds like that's essentially the strategy to ensure success and to get people on the journey with you.
For sure. No, you can't build it on your own, basically. So, but there's a lot of challenges in the process. People need to be prepared for setbacks, and you need the team to feel engaged and enthusiastic. So when unexpected events occur, you've got enough kind of energy in the tank still to push on and get over them, basically. Yeah.
Brilliant, Chris. Thank you for sharing your experience on new sites and going through that approval process. It sounds pretty intense. I'm not going to lie.
Good fun. I mean, if you've got to sort of like that intensity. I mean, I quite enjoy it. You've got to be up for that, definitely. But it's good fun.
Okay, brilliant, Chris. Thank you. And I suppose bringing back to QPs in particular. I mean, the way I like to try and close the show is trying to get your best advice for aspiring trainee QPs or maybe junior QPs very early on in the career who are just starting out. I mean, what advice would you provide to them?
Sure. So I think that the main piece of advice I'd give to anybody either wanting to become a QP or starting out, or even anyone in who's reasonably experienced as a QP is, I think the first thing to do is think about the end user. So who is the medicine who's that medicine gonna be presented to? What's the nature of the patient group? And keep those in your thoughts when you're looking at challenges and issues as a QP. Because it's easy to be worried about what your reputation in the company and what people might think of you for your decisions. It's a natural human thing. It's easy to worry about the regulator, and you'd make a decision, think, what would the regulator say? But the person you want to think about first is the end user of the product, the patient. So when you're making your decisions, be guided by your thoughts about them, and it's the reward as much as the risk. So I've made products for people who are very, very ill, and you can the reward is bigger than the risk in many ways. So if somebody's very, very poorly, there's no alternative for the medicine. The patient would expect you to take a little bit more risk on their behalf to get them that medicine, and you do need to think about that. And that's not to say you should be cavalier or do things that are wrong, but you may want to think more carefully about that patient group. You may need to go further and do more work to get the medicine to them. You may need to go an extra mile for that group. Whereas looking at consumer health products, then it's a different thing. Why would you take any risk with a consumer health product? You need to go to the next batch and put it behind you. But where I've worked a lot on blood products, so the supply of the raw material is limited. The patients are often very ill. Where you find the problem, you've got to go the extra mile to fix it because the patients are relying on you for that medicine. So do my advice to you is do think about the patient first. I think that you've got to, as a QP, I'm sure it's a well-hackneyed phrase, but it's as much about the power to say yes as the power to say no. You've got to balance your decisions, and you've got to find that middle ground where you're confident to say yes and confident to say no. My advice to anybody as a trainee QP is if you're not sure about the answer, say I'm not sure. I'm going to look at that and I'll get back to you. Because I think there's a danger you'll default to say no. And if you're wrong, then you've got to come and climb down later. And that can harm your credibility as a QP. So if you don't know, and after 30 years of doing this, I still come to lots of stuff where initially I look at something and think, I don't know what's going on here. This doesn't make any sense. So what I'll say, everybody stood around thinking, well, you're the QP, just tell us the answer. And you do feel that pressure, but of course, we're all human. So I say, look, guys, honestly, I'm not sure what the answer is here. I probably need this data. I need this data. I need to look at it, and I'll get back to you with an answer. I appreciate it's important, and we need to work it out. And often I'll take that away and consider it. And what I'll try and do is get to a definitive answer, one that I can stand behind, and not have to sort of flip flop or change my mind later. My objective when I'm working a company is if I say no, we can't do that. If nobody questions it, I've kind of I've laid the groundwork properly, and I've kind of got the company on side. Whereas if folks think I'm going to maybe flip flop and say yes later, I've failed to manage expectations. So I try and give that definitive answer when I'm happy I don't have to change it. But there's a temptation to QP when somebody asks you a question you don't know the answer. You want to default to no, and my recommendation is default to I don't know. I'm going to figure it out. You might want to give a time frame to that, but I think it gives you an easier life as a QP if you do that.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, that's superb advice for trainees and QPs in general in terms of the thought process behind decision making. So thank you for sharing that, Chris, and a great way to end the show. So thank you so much for your time and being a guest on the QP Diaries. It's obviously we know each other well, but it's wonderful to have this chat with you. It's always fascinating, Chris. If any of our listeners want to contact you regarding advice, mentorship, your services as a consultancy, what's the best way to do that, Chris?
I guess really sort of two ways. Either through LinkedIn is a good way to do that, or through yourself. So either of those is fine. But I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there. So either of those is fine.
Brilliant. All right. Well, thank you once again, Chris. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
My pleasure. Great to speak to you as well. Take care.
See ya. Bye. A huge thank you to our special guest and to our listeners for tuning into the QP Diaries podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. As the founder of AssureBio, we created the podcast to support our wider quality assurance community, which aligns to our dedicated offering as a recruitment agency, providing services to the pharmaceutical and biotech industry across the UK. We have over 15 years experience in the industry, exclusively focused on recruiting senior quality assurance leaders and QPs. If you want to learn more about AssureBio's recruitment services, or if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, then please don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you.